knowing exactly what the process we're going to be going through is going to be really, really useful. So without further ado, one more thing. We're going to have a Q&A, and go ahead and put your questions into chat, and we'll go ahead and pull questions from chat for the Q&A so that it doesn't become too chaotic. So go ahead and put your questions in chat, and without further ado, Ben McAdams, I don't think you need an introduction, do you?
I don't, Christian, but thank you for having me. And the one thing I would add to my bio is the first chair of the LDS Dems when the caucus was founded almost 10 years ago. So yeah, great to be with you all, and thank you for your advocacy and being such a loud and important voice in our Big Tent Utah Democratic Party. I do want to be respectful. As Christian said, I am, and I assume you all know, I am supporting Evan McMullen and his request that we join his coalition. But I'm not here to speak on his behalf. He's already spoken, and so I want to let him speak for himself, as he has already done, and keep my comments more focused on the process. So you're welcome to ask questions. I've got the chat open. I don't know how much I'll be able to speak and monitor the chat, so I'll invite Christian to maybe read those to me as we move forward. But just wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, there's a question about whether the Utah Democratic Party Constitution allows this move. And this is not something that's common. It's not necessarily unprecedented, but it is also not uncommon. So the Utah, and one point you'll hear in this conversation, the Utah Democratic Convention, or the Utah Democratic Constitution says, and I'm going to read here from Article 2, Section 4. So a lot of people who are opposing this move are saying that Article 2, Section 4 says that, I'm talking about Section 1 says that the Utah Democratic Party shall nominate and assist in the election of Democratic Party candidates for public elected office. So some people will cite this Article 1 and say, therefore, we can't even consider this option under the Constitution because it's not allowed per our party Constitution. Now, I am an attorney, although it's been many years since I've practiced law, but I am an attorney, and I've been in public service for many years, as you all know. But one of the things that I have studied and know well is legislative interpretation, how courts will interpret things like statutes and constitutions. So there's a principle in legislative interpretation that says the more specific principle governs over the general broad statement. And so I'll give an example of that in a quick second. But so what we look at is Section 4 says the convention may nominate at least one candidate for the offices of United States Senator, each district, lieutenant governor, etc. But the operative word is may. So the example that I would give is, let's say that I have 4 kids, and one thing I've always wished is that there was a parenting handbook that told me what I needed to do and how to be a good parent, because I certainly failed in many accounts. But let's say there was a parenting handbook, and Chapter 1 of the parenting handbook says the responsibility of a parent is to provide food for your children. And then you flip forward to Chapter 4, and Chapter 4 says you may give your child candy, right? But there's going to be different factors that you might consider in that may. So in statutory interpretation, you could say you have to give your child candy because it says in Chapter 1 that the duty of a parent is to feed their children. You have no discretion. If there's food available, you have to give it to your kids. Well, principles of statutory interpretation would go and look forward to that more specific term that says you may give your child candy, and you're going to then weigh various factors about whether you want to give your child candy or not. So this is pretty well settled. The Utah Democratic Party Constitution does allow party delegates the discretion whether to nominate a candidate or to not nominate a candidate. So what you can expect at the convention next Saturday, a week from today, is there will be a motion to join Evan McMullen's coalition to defeat Mike Lee. And undoubtedly that motion will be heavily debated, as it should be. That's the purpose of convention. And then you as delegates will ask to make a decision on that, whether we join that coalition closely and run many very competitive campaigns. The one thing that I would say is that competitive races turn out voters who vote down ticket. So I can say with absolute certainty that if we have a competitive race where we have a candidate that we are backing, whether that candidate is an independent or a Democrat, but if that candidate is highly competitive and we are part of that coalition, that will have the effect of turning out down ballot races. People will feel motivated to vote in that election. And one of the things that is unmotivating is when you see your candidate polling 30 percentage points behind the incumbent. People just don't feel motivated to turn out. The other thing that turns out voters in competitive elections is when the race is competitive, those of you who live in Congressional District 4 or supported my campaign in 2018 and 2020, what you saw is that we had an enormous coordinated campaign. That meant we had paid staff and thousands of volunteers who, starting right after convention all the way through election day, were knocking doors. We had an incredible database of all voters. We knew who we had talked to and where they were. And then when the ballots hit, we knew those people who had pledged to support for me who had not yet voted. So we were going and chasing ballots, calling them and saying, we realize you haven't voted yet. Is there anything we can do to help you get your vote out? So that was an important part of that campaign that we were able to do because of the coordinated campaign that my candidacy brought resources to support. That absolutely benefited down ballot candidates in tough districts. We were able to coordinate our efforts with those candidates to turn out voters who wanted to support me. Maybe they weren't following the county council races or the state legislative races, but they wanted to support me, and that mattered to down ballot candidates because they would then, once they showed up to vote, they would vote in those other races, and it benefited candidates down the ballot. The last thing I wanted to address relating to the process is what happens at convention. So there's some indication that this is not an appropriate exercise for us at convention to consider narrowing our strategy and focusing our strategy on one candidate. One thing I can also say with a certainty is that, and there are arguments on my side of this, and there are valid arguments on the side of those who oppose this move. One thing I can say with a certainty, though, is if there's a finite number of voters. Mike Lee has a pretty solid, his supporters are pretty solidly behind him. But you do have roughly 30% of Republicans who are disaffected, who don't like Donald Trump, don't like Mike Lee, and they're looking for some place to go. Now, I've polled and focus grouped and spent years talking to these voters in my campaign, because that's part of the coalition that's helped me to get elected before, is peeling off those disaffected Republicans to support me. Now, some of those disaffected Republicans are willing to vote for a Democrat in some cases. Many of them, unfortunately, are not willing to vote for a Democrat. So the voters that we need to bring together to support, to defeat Mike Lee, are those disaffected Republicans, many of whom will not vote for a Democrat, independents, some of whom will not vote for a Democrat, and then Democrats. One thing I know for certain is that if we split that and we have two strategies going in, a moderate independent and a progressive Democrat, we split those voters willing to vote against Mike Lee, and Mike Lee most likely wins that race. It's not over, but and Evan McMullen does have a chance at that point, but it's a much closer race. If we are able to form a coalition to build a bigger tent, there's a pathway to winning this election. So that's process and some of the thinking behind that. I recognize there are pros and cons, there are differing opinions on all sides, and that's a decision you as delegates are going to be asked to make, as you are asked to make at conventions every 2 years. We have heartbreaking decisions where we eliminate people from the ballot, as we did in county conventions over the last several months, because we know that while we have multiple candidates that we all like, we know that the ultimate goal is to move forward policies that are going to affect the people who are counting on us. And in order to do that, we have to make tough choices. We have to hone our strategy, and we have to put forward make the most strategic decision in order to advance the policies that people on us care about.
So that's a great opener, Ben. Everyone, I know we all have questions. Continue to drop them into chat, and I'll go ahead and field those. Ben, someone here just asked, so what exactly will the vote be at convention? Are we voting to nominate or to endorse? And what's the repercussion from that? What happens when that vote passes or fails?
Yeah, I don't think that the exact verbiage of the motion has been written at this point. It will be a floor motion according to our bylaws. There will be a floor motion essentially to join the Mullins Coalition. I'm not privy to what the exact text of that will be, but there will be a floor motion to join that coalition. And if that motion passes, then what will happen is the Democratic Party will not have a candidate in the U.S. Senate race, and we will become part of this coalition that Evan Mullins has called for of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats.
All right, so I'm going to restate that just so I understand. There's the large group meeting where we're all sitting in chairs, and we are I think it's the rules meeting, isn't it? Where we go ahead and which meeting? What's the meeting?
It'll be the general convention. So the convention.
Okay, so we're going to be in that meeting, and someone will put forward the motion that you just described, and we'll have that back and forth that we always do when there's a motion.
Shoot.
And at the end of the day, we may have the opportunity to do just what you said, to join Evan McMullen's coalition or to field Gail Weston as a candidate. Is that
right? And what I would expect, what I think people can expect is there will be, as happens with these floor motions, there will be yays and nays, and it'll probably be both sides will yell the yay or nay loudest to hopefully give the perception that they won, and it'll probably be pretty close, and so we won't know. And so then whichever side is seen to prevail, we'll be happy about it. Whichever side is seen to not prevail, will call for and I don't know which side that will be, but they'll call for a recorded vote. And so at that point, there will be a motion, and then what you'll expect to see is a vote that will come across the regular channels and how you're voting in other races, and you'll get a notification to vote on this motion.
Oh, beautiful.
Hey, and Brad Townley's raised his hand. He may have some input.
Oh, hey, Brad. Let's go ahead. Did you have a comment there, Brad? Because, it's not like we're strangers to this.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be in the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee's already met, so that everybody has a kind of general idea of what the process is going to look like. The morning of convention, the first thing is that the delegates will vote to adopt our convention rules. And then, we'll go through platform debate, et cetera, candidate speeches, and then we'll get to the part where we're doing our endorsements. At that point, a motion to nominate or not nominate Mr. Weston would be in order. All of those votes, any vote directly related to a candidate's nomination, is going to start off as a recorded vote. We're going to send out an election buddy for every one of those. So if you are participating in person, you'll get your ballot still emailed to you. We'll have computers set up for people who don't have smartphones with them. If you are at home, everything will be being live streamed to you, but you need to stay by your computer because the time limit for these votes on each of these four motions is going to, by necessity be short. Otherwise, we could spend a week just waiting for all the motion votes to come back and everything. We'll also be up there explaining every single motion, what it means, the impact, and the counter motions to all of the delegates, with the goal of finding what 50% plus one of our delegates would like to have happen. So we'll be up there facilitating the process to make sure that we don't get lost in parliamentary hell and everybody understands what's happening and how to move forward. That's all I've heard. The explanations that people have been giving so far have been great.
Thank you, Brad. And yeah, we definitely want to avoid parliamentary hell. I'm sure I'm missing a syllable in there someplace. We have had a couple of questions just float in. Does the Rules Committee know that this is going to happen? Ben?
I would say they know way more than they wish they knew. It's been a contentious and spirited debate amongst the Rules Committee. That's what Democrats do well, right? We debate and we have contentious disagreements, but usually we pull together at the end. So yes, the Rules Committee does know and are aware, and this process, I think, is pretty well vetted, and I think all parties understand that this is the questions before the delegates, and ultimately the delegates will have to say.
All right, thank you, Ben. Next question that we've got here. Do the bylaws specifically anticipate that delegates should vote in uncontested races, or is it automatic nomination?
Well, the delegates always have to be nominated at convention. It's a formal part of the process. So oftentimes where we don't have contested races, what you'll see, if you've been to conventions before, you see that we'll say, the slate of these candidates have been nominated, we move by acclamation to formalize the nomination of these candidates. So that's oftentimes what you'll see, and it's just a quick vote, usually a floor vote, voice vote, and we all say aye, and then those candidates have checked that box and been formally nominated. Since this process is contended, and there are strong voices who are in opposition to simply nominating Cale Westman, then I think we'll see that vote won't be unanimous, and it'll go down the path that we described previously.
All right. Next question has come up here. If we vote for no candidate, will that automatically make all Dems part of the McMullen coalition? I believe that's talking about all the Democratic candidates elsewhere on the ballot. I'm interpreting that question, so if I'm wrong, put it in the chat, folks, and let me know.
Yeah, what I'll say to that is we always have a choice, right? You can, whether it's a school board race or state senate race, if your candidate is eliminated at the convention and you say, I just can't believe that they eliminated John Doe or Jane Doe, I'm not going to vote for the winner because I just don't think they're a good candidate. You always have you're entitled to your opinion, entitled to cast your vote however you like. What it does mean is the Democratic Party, there will not be somebody on the ballot with an E next to their name, and that means that the Democratic Party as an institution will be enabled to join that coalition and to work to turn out our voters to defeat my vote.
All right. There's a question I think we answered, but I'm going to put it out just in case. It says, does the floor vote include those who are voting remotely? I think Brad said that it does indeed. Correct, Brad?
Yes, that is correct. But again, regardless of where you stand on this issue, it is important that you stay by your computer during the floor debate if you want to have your voice heard.
Beautiful. And the next question I see here, they're asking about this is what they said. They said they said Ben, as a Democratic Party expert, if Evan receives the support, if we join that coalition, does the party plan to provide support throughout the race? What is the effect for down ballot candidates? I think you've already talked about down ballot candidates, but do you have an inkling? Do we have a sense of the support for this from the party?
So I think that's something that is yet to be determined. I know from my conversations with Evan McMullen that he's pledged that he will support, he will openly support Democrats in down ballot races. I think he's looking to forge a coalition of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. So I don't know that he would support 100% of Democrats because I think he is an independent. But I think we can see him willing to support us, especially in some of our key races where we have some tough races for candidates. That's my expectation. So the inverse of what the Democratic Party will do to support the McMullen coalition, that is not yet decided. But so our bylaws essentially say that the delegates are the body of the legislative body, if you will, for setting the path for the Utah Democratic Party. So how this vote comes out at the convention next week will really give direction to the party staff really is your choice of delegates to say, do you support joining this coalition? I believe that it does increase our chances of defeating Mike Lee. It actually, I would even say that if this happens next week, I would call Evan McMullen the front runner in this race against Mike Lee. But I respect opinions who believe that may be a step too far for the Democratic Party. Some believe that. But essentially, you give the direction to the party as delegates, and then party staff will take that direction and work with the McMullen campaign to determine what that means really.
All right. There's a short lull in questions that I see popping up for myself. So I'm going to take the moderator's privilege here and ask you a question for myself. There's a great deal of there are a lot of people who vote straight ticket. So, what is our understanding of the impact of this coalition should it materialize? What is the impact for voters who do straight ticket voting who are Democrat? Do we have a good sense of that?
Yep, we do. In 2020, Representative Patrice Aaron passed legislation to eliminate straight ticket voting. So that is no longer on the ballot. I believe that it's actually one of the factors that makes this coalition viable and makes this race winnable.
Well, I could pretend that I knew that already, and I was just asking for the folks at home, but I didn't. I remember that legislation. I just don't remember that it passed. All right.
Yeah.
I see another question that's just rolled up. Have coalitions like this worked elsewhere?
So, yeah, a couple of things. And can I bring in another question that I'm looking at right now?
Yeah.